In the decades since the 1959 Cuban Revolution, tens of thousands of Cuban rafters, also known as Balseros, have taken to the Straits of Florida by raft or small boat, embarking on a dangerous journey away from the island nation. This talk will explore how U.S. representations of the Balsero crossings shape public perception of the issue within the U.S. A photo taken by a Miami Herald staff photographer depicts a desperate scene. A group of Balseros travel aboard a raft covered in a blue tarp. The edge of their oblique vessel dips precariously low into the choppy blue water. Some of the Balseros sit, while those who stand clutch their paddles for balance as they look out in all directions. Who can tell which way is forward here? The sea that surrounds them hopelessly extends beyond the frame of the photograph so that viewers, perhaps like the pictured Balseros, lack a point of reference with which to judge whether they're headed in the right direction. There's no horizon in sight. The Straits of Florida form a natural border between Cuba and the United States, its waters narrowing to roughly 90 miles where the journey across is shortest. But despite the body of water's function as a national border, with no wall or fence or human-made markers of territory, this spatially massive border seems invisible. The Balseros enter this blue expanse, this gap between national borders, in hopes of reaching U.S. soil. It is estimated that as many as 100,000 Cubans may have died in the Straits of Florida, though the exact number remains unknown. The Balseros who die in the Straits die in international waters, and there is no official procedure for reclaiming and identifying them. Even if there were, the sea and its powerful current engulf the bodies, leaving few visible traces behind. In the absence of visual representations of the dead, the circumstance of the Balsero at sea is revealed in representations of the living. A closer look at the Miami Herald photo will show that 4 of the Balseros seem to be facing in the direction of the viewer. One man stands on the sinking edge of the vessel, waving a sun-worn American flag. The exceptional nature of this moment emerges with this flag. It's doubtful that this man has been holding this position the whole time they've been out on the water. The man hails in the direction of the camera, his billowing flag a symbol of their resolve to land on U.S. soil. The fact that the Balseros acknowledge the camera raises the question of the position of the photographer. What seems at first to be an insignificant obstruction of the photo lens in the upper right-hand corner betrays the photographer's position on a neighboring vessel. This photo, taken by a photojournalist during the 1994 Cuban Raft crisis, would have been shot during a ride-along on a U.S. Coast Guard ship on a mission to rescue Balseros adrift at sea. Photojournalists have created an important body of work documenting the plight of the Balseros over the years. As a result, U.S. news media has defined and proliferated a Balsero image type that has become both iconic and conventional. However, in the majority of these representations, only the living are made visible. These images are taken from U.S. Coast Guard ships or from the Brothers to the Rescue planes that would fly over the Straits trying to spot drifting Balseros. The fact of the photographer's position on one of these designated rescue vessels means that in the case of the most iconic photographs of Balseros at sea, image equals rescue. The photographer literally shares the position of the rescuing agent, and the photograph extends this perspective to viewers. Ironically, the media image that conveys the desperation of the Balseros at the same time reassures the U.S. viewer that the event is near resolution. The image takes place only when rescue is imminent. This visual rhetoric uplifts the narrative of the rescued refugee and conflates U.S. positionality with humanitarian intervention. Such rhetoric elides the fact that since the 1994 Cuban Raft crisis, when wet foot, dry foot, when this policy was implemented, Cuban rafters are required to set foot on U.S. soil in order to be granted a path to residency. Those who are intercepted at sea by the U.S. Coast Guard are sent to temporary detention camps or repatriated to Cuba. These images halt the narrative of rescue in the moment that conveys U.S. humanitarian aid. Image doesn't simply mean rescue, it also means capture. Out at sea, the Balsero is rhetorically caught in an impossible position between two countries engaged in a continuous ideological battle. To Cuba, they are dissenters and traitors. To the U.S., they are border crossers and undesirables. But for the Balsero who does not get rescued, who disappears into the watery depths of the Straits, the absence of representation betrays the political stakes of recognizing these deaths. The image of the rescued refugee makes it possible to fold the Balsero into a narrative that absolves the United States of responsibility for the deaths of non-citizens that happen just beyond its borders. Meanwhile, the seascape obscures the evidence of these deaths below its surface. The lost Balsero, then, is both visually and politically relegated to the realm of the unrepresentable. In the absence of representation, what is left of the lost Balseros? Echoing the Balseros who have disappeared into the water, the empty rafts continue their journeys. The Straits of Florida uniquely act as a border that immediately subsumes the bodies of those who cross it, but pushes their belongings to our shores. Countering the accumulation of media images that negate the dead, the empty rafts continuously wash up onto Florida beaches. They evoke a sense of absence that is inextricably bound to the mysterious fates of their passengers. They emerge worn and rusted, masses of swollen, cracked wood and tattered canvas. These ephemeral objects, perhaps created only to last the few days' journey anticipated by their makers, continue to deteriorate on land. Out of the thousands of rafts that have arrived, a few have made their way into local museums. The History Miami Museum in downtown Miami showcases a single raft called the TOB. The TOB has a distinct bow and stern as well as a sail, although its canvas siding and plywood frame betray its handmade origins. It is part of a sparsely curated exhibition called History and Ourselves that, according to the museum, features the top artifacts and archives from the museum's collections over the years that relate to the themes arrive, adapt, grow, and live. The objects themselves are not interrelated outside of having some connection to the city of Miami. The Cuban Raft appears alongside basketball court floor panels featuring the Miami Heat logo and a sign for the fictional Miramar Playa Hotel, which was the setting for a television show set in Miami called Magic City that ran for 2 seasons before getting canceled. How does the museum's positioning of the raft alongside a set piece from a fictional television show impact a viewer's reception of its historical and political significance? Is the raft just another feature of Miami's colorful local history? For many residents of Miami, whose regional history has been so heavily impacted by the legacy of the Cuban rafters, the raft is likely legible as a trace of the Balsero crossings. However, the complete removal of the vessel from the international context of Cuban migration to the U.S. both dehistoricizes and depoliticizes the object. This is most evident in the museum's descriptive plaque for the TOB, which reads as follows. Cuban Raft, 1994. This raft carried 7 people, all rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard and taken to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The raft later washed up on Soldier Key, gift of world resources. No mention that 1994 was the year of the Cuban rafter crisis, when more than 32,000 Cubans attempted to cross the Straits of Florida. No mention of how many people have died during this journey. A crucial detail that this plaque evades is that during the rafter crisis, the Balseros were not simply taken to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, but were transferred to the U.S.-operated Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, where the refugees lived for months in an overcrowded and unsanitary detention camp surrounded by barbed wire. Like the images of the Balseros rescued at sea, the museum display of this Cuban raft halts the narrative in the moment of rescue. Identified only by the national and cultural designation Cuban and the year it was found, the TOB is presented as if it were some foreign or ancient artifact whose origins are unknown. In this context, the raft sheds its history. Presenting the lone raft as a mysterious artifact not only erases the spatial and political context from which it emerged, but positions the raft and the Balseros crossings as anomalous events of a historical past. To position the raft as an anomaly is to suggest that the Balsero crossings are somehow unusual or exceptional. In reality, the rafts are the traces of what has become a regular occurrence in the Straits of Florida. But because each raft is removed from the shore upon arrival, the visual traces of the Balsero crossings are systematically swept out of the landscape and out of public view. When the raft becomes a foreign artifact, when it becomes an anomaly, so does the Balsero. Together, the museum and the media construct a visual representation of the Balsero crossings that implies false resolution. While the image proliferates a narrative of rescue, the exhibition reinforces that narrative by sealing it into a vague historical past. By severing them from their contexts, these representations effectively depoliticize the remaining traces of the Balsero crossings. Even following the announcement that Cuba and the U.S. will move toward restoring diplomatic relations, more and more Balseros set out to the Straits of Florida today. Just as representations of the Balsero crossings do not mark their end, neither does the recent announcement signify a smooth or immediate transition into normal relations. If we are to move forward, we must resist moving on. Perhaps it is easy to forget and move on when the sea obscures the evidence of death and when the deaths occur beyond our border and seem only to affect non-citizens. But the immense human loss that occurs at our doorstep does not pertain exclusively to one country. Rather, it is a loss shared by the two, and with that shared loss comes shared responsibility. By attending to the ways that our perception is constructed through representations and omissions within our own visual culture, we can begin to rethink our relationships to entities that have only been made to seem so very far away. Thank you.